tell me something about you. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Ah, that's a long story. It happened a long time ago. I was actually born in Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean islands. Um, and I was there till I was about 3. My father was with a pharmaceutical company and doing business, and he met my mother there, and I was born. And after about 3 years, we moved to the Philippines, and I spent the rest of my youth in Southeast Asia, um, mainly in Malaysia. Actually, had a lot of friends from who were Tamils. There's a lot of Tamils from in Malaysia, and then I moved to Indonesia at age 15 and graduated from high school, and then I moved to the US, and here I am. That was in 1977. So I miss Asia very much. It's sort of my second home, and I don't know when I'll get back there, but I really do miss it.
Very good. So that's a long trajectory from Trinidad and Tobago to Malaysia and Indonesia.
Yeah, my,
Probably that gave you a wide view of the world, like to see different cultures.
yeah, it did. And my father's with a pharmaceutical company, and so we would travel quite a bit. And I spent some time in India as a kid, not nearly enough. A week in beautiful Kashmir before the troubles, and so we were. And my mother's German, so I was exposed to a lot of the European, spending a lot of time in Europe as a kid. So I was really sort of a nomad. I never had a permanent home growing up, and so that had its benefits and it had its costs. But overall, I think you're right. It gave me I saw a lot of the world that many people in my from my socioeconomic class in the United States didn't get to see. So I was very fortunate that way.
Very good. You are an attorney, right?
I am, yes.
Which law school did you go to?
I went to Santa Clara University School of Law in right about an hour south of San Francisco. And I was actually not planning on being an attorney. I wanted to go be a professor. So I went to Berkeley and did a 2-year master's program in Asian studies. And then I decided academics is too hard for me. So I went to law school. So
Wow.
I've been a lawyer almost exactly 30 years now. And I do
Wow.
primarily immigration law.
Wow. That's really
One of my
very,
very first clients was a Sikh man from Punjab province, an Indian man
ah,
seeking immigration status in the United States. So,
wow.
yeah.
You have some understanding of Indian culture.
Not nearly as much as I would like, but I'm a fascinating country. I've watched a lot of Indian films. I love the ancient music. I almost bought a sursingar, the old the even older than the sitar. It looks like a sitar, but it's called a sursingar. And I live a few miles from the Ali Akbar Khan School of Indian Music, and
Mhm.
long thought I want to go there and take some lessons and really learn Indian music, but it's just too difficult for me. It's very, very complicated and very rich and very technical. So I decided I will just listen to Indian music rather than learn to play it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what is your status in faith matters? Like, uh, are you a Christian? Are you non-religious? How do you describe yourself?
I describe myself as a, an atheist and a cultural Christian. I grew up around missionaries in Southeast Asia and was always very attracted to Christianity, um, and very attracted to the missionaries and their children who were my friends in school. And I always felt that this is the true religion. And when I moved to the United States, I became very active as a Christian. I had a born again experience and was very devoted. But the problem for me was I could never quite shake the still small voice in my head that said, this is not true. So at about age 20, I decided, to be honest with myself, I can't stop pretending to be a Christian. I just have to say I don't really believe this, but that didn't stop me from loving many things about Christianity. For instance, I love the music, both the ancient sounds, the Gregorian chants. I love the old hymns from the southern United States. I love Christmas. Every Christmas Eve, I go with my mother to sing lessons and carols, and it's a very important part of the year for me. So I'm not an anti-religion or anti-Christian atheist. I just happen to not think there's a God.
Very good. So coming to Ravi Zacharias,
Ah, yes.
what you did is very consequential, and you realize that, right? Like right now, like I mean, millions of Christians were shocked by the revelations about Ravi, and even myself. I am from India. When I was like 15 years old, my dad took me to one of his meetings, and since that time, I have been attending his meetings, and I was reading his books, and I was listening to every debate he was doing. So this
Mm,
experience for millions of people around the world.
yeah.
And I started with you. I mean, I think you are the first one um, who raised the suspicions about Ravi, right?
Yes, that's true. Unfortunately, it's not true that I'm the first one to. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
not. I'm not blaming you for that. Okay, I'm just saying.
I understand. No, I don't think it's a matter of blame. I think it's a good thing that the truth came out. But I wanted to say that unfortunately I was the first one to speak out, but I was not the first one to notice. There were uh, evangelicals in ministry and in academics had known for decades that Ravi Zacharias was being dishonest about his academic credentials. So this was fairly well known. In fact, a few days ago, I was contacted by someone from Princeton University who said in 2013 they refused to invite Ravi to come speak to Princeton for ethical reasons. They did not like the way he presented himself as an expert in things that he was not an expert in. So, but what's really interesting to me here is that people knew that Ravi was misrepresenting his credentials, claiming to be a doctor, claiming to be Cambridge educated, claiming to be a professor at Oxford. Um, and people knew that he was lying about this, but not a single Christian spoke out about it. I was the first person, as far as I've been able to tell, and I've looked into it quite carefully, I was the first person in the world to actually say, hey, this guy is lying and this is not okay. And that really bothers me, Dr. Paul, because this is something that really should have been public long ago. 25 years ago, people should have been speaking about this. But it took a, an atheist lawyer to be the first one to say, Ravi Zacharias is lying. And now, of course, you say the work is consequential. The first 5 years I was complaining about Ravi, it wasn't very consequential. People ignored me. Christians were many of Ravi's defenders were very vicious. They were insulting. They were closed-minded. And so I spent the first few years feeling like this work isn't very consequential. And it took a sex scandal to break the news a few months ago, and now the whole world knows that Ravi Zacharias was leading a double life and that he was a very deceptive man who abused a lot of people.
So I really admire your courage in doing all of these things against the tide. And
Thank you. I appreciate that. It didn't so much take courage. I live in a pretty safe place. I never felt I was threatened. I never felt that I would lose my life or I'd be injured or I didn't really worry about I didn't worry about losing a job because I'm self-employed as a lawyer. So I didn't have the kinds of dangers that would require courage. What I did have was a temper tantrum. I was angry about his lying, and I was determined to get the evidence out, the news out. So I give myself a good mark for being dedicated and being persistent. But the courage, I was never afraid.
Yeah, I meant it in the sense that when everybody loves somebody so much, it's not easy to say a bad thing about them.
That is true. Yes. Well, thank you. Yes, that's true. And it isn't fun reading people now on the internet and social media saying my faith is destroyed, or I'm so upset about what I've read about Ravi. That doesn't feel good to me. I don't take any pleasure in upsetting people. As a good atheist, I think we all have one life, and I don't want to make anybody's life worse. I want to make their life better if I can. So it is not a fun, happy thing to see people suffering by the truth that has finally come out about Ravi. The counterpoint to that is, or the flip side to that would be that it's better for people. I think the world is a better place with people knowing that Ravi Zacharias was a liar and an abusive man. I think that will make people more careful. I think that will make people less naive and less susceptible to abusive people in ministry. So I think it's overall a very good thing. But yes, my heart goes out to the people who are suffering with the news.
How did you come to know about Ravi Zacharias?
Ah, yes. One of the things, even though I'm an atheist, you're going to think I'm a very bad atheist because in addition to loving Christmas and Christian music, I also study at a Christian school here in the San Francisco Bay Area. For many years, I've been studying at the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology in Berkeley. And I've been very interested in, despite my non-belief, I've been very interested in Christian philosophy. And so I try to keep aware of who are the good scholars in Christianity and who are the best apologists for the faith. And I want to read those people. So in 2015, I happened upon this man named Ravi Zacharias, who was very, very impressive. He was a professor at Oxford. He had been educated at Cambridge. He'd actually studied quantum physics at Cambridge, and so he had that very high-grade scientific background in addition to his philosophical training. So I was extremely impressed with him, and so I began following him, and something didn't seem right to me, and I began to suspect that he was a bit dishonest. And the thing that first got me to think that Ravi was being dishonest was he made an argument about the book of Daniel. He said the book of Daniel was written 6th century BC, but it predicted Alexander the Great 200 years later, and that this must be the work of God through Daniel. And I heard this argument, and I was very impressed with it. In fact, I was willing to change my worldview based on if that argument turned out to be true. And I looked into it, and I realized that many scholars, in fact, most scholars now think Daniel was written after Alexander the Great. Now, I'm not an expert in this. The only thing that I do know is that it was not very honest of Ravi not to tell his audience that the book of Daniel, some scholars think it was written later, right? He left out a key premise. He left out the fact that his central premise was really, really controversial. And that just struck me as deceiving his non-specialist audience. So I began to wonder, well, why would a man with impeccable academic credentials from Cambridge and Oxford, why would he be that dishonest with a audience of undergraduate students? Why not reveal that there's a controversial premise in the argument? And so I began looking into it, and I found that Ravi never earned a doctorate. He had no doctorates. His doctorates were only honorary. He never was a professor at Oxford, even though he widely claimed to be a professor at Oxford. He never was. He never had any formal teaching position at the University of Oxford. He had never enrolled at Cambridge, despite widely claiming, you can see it in his books, Cambridge-educated Ravi Zacharias. In his autobiography about leaving India for Canada, he talks about being invited as a visiting scholar to Cambridge. None of that was true. And this surprised me, and I just began publicizing my findings because I thought this was important. And then eventually I kept investigating and found much more bad stuff about Mr. Zacharias, including a sex scandal that broke in 2017, or there was a lawsuit in 2017. And then, of course, last September, the facts came out that Ravi had owned massage spas in the state of Georgia where he lived and was sexually abusing the women there.